We all remember The Thing, right? The practical effects were truly out of this world, and even to this day, that spider head and dog twisting into a nightmare pretzel still hold up in my books. But here's the thing, from a biological perspective, the horror of the creature is that it's basically a walking scientific crisis. It studies living tissue, assimilates it, and rebuilds itself into an almost perfect imitation. It can copy dogs, human beings, and potentially any other living organism it encounters. That's why today we're going to be talking about the Thing from another perspective. We're going to try to treat it like what it actually is, a hostile extraterrestrial organism with a terrifying and almost impossible anatomy. So, without any further ado, let's get down to business. Is the Thing actually one creature or a whole colony of them? This question changes pretty much everything, right? If you understand what you're dealing with, you might have a chance of surviving it. The safest answer is that the Thing functions like a distributed organism rather than one ordinary animal controlled by a single brain. In the 1982 film, Blair concludes that the creature imitates other life forms at a cellular level. Later, after watching Norris's severed head detach, grow legs, and attempt to escape, McCready develops the theory that every separated part of the Thing acts like an individual animal with its own instinct for self-preservation. The blood test scene supports this idea. A tiny sample of Palmer's blood reacts to the heated wire and tries to escape, even though it's been separated from the rest of Palmer's body. That means the Thing doesn't appear to depend on a single permanent heart, brain, or nervous system. Once a section is cut away, that section can apparently protect itself and become a smaller autonomous Thing form. However, we should be careful about saying that every individual microscopic cell has a fully developed mind. The films don't prove that. What they do establish is that even small samples of Thing tissue can behave independently when threatened. So, biologically speaking, the creature is best understood as a distributed superorganism. Its living material can separate, reorganize, and continue acting without waiting for instructions from one central brain. That alone makes it far more difficult to kill than any normal animal. How does the Thing assimilate a body at the cellular level? Now let's talk about the takeover. The 1982 film shows Blair examining the dog Thing and running a computer simulation in which alien cells surround, absorb, and imitate normal cells. That gives us a basic model for the assimilation process. The creature comes into contact with living tissue, breaks it down, studies its biological structure, and replaces it with its own imitation. But the process isn't always completely silent or invisible. Sometimes the Thing appears to assimilate victims gradually or in isolation. Other times it physically grabs, envelops, and absorbs them. The kennel scene is the clearest example. The dog Thing lashes out with tendrils, attaches itself to other dogs, and begins incorporating their tissue into its own mass. Bennings is also found in the middle of a physical transformation. His body isn't calmly being converted while he walks around normally. The Thing is visibly rebuilding him when Windows interrupts the process. So the best explanation is that cellular replacement is the underlying mechanism, but the speed and violence of this process can change depending on the circumstances. If the creature has time and privacy, it can create a convincing imitation. If it's interrupted or threatened, the assimilation becomes violent, messy, and visibly alien. Once the transformation is complete, the new body can look almost perfectly human from the outside. But underneath that disguise, every part of the anatomy belongs to the Thing. Does a Thing copy still have your memories and personality? This is one of the most disturbing questions in the entire film. A Thing copy doesn't merely look like the person it replaces, it can apparently behave like them convincingly enough to fool close friends and co-workers. Palmer still talks like Palmer. Norris still acts like Norris. The infected men understand language, know the layout of the base, recognize the other crew members, and continue participating in conversations without immediately exposing themselves. That strongly suggests that the Thing can reproduce at least part of the victim's nervous system and stored knowledge. If it copied only the victim's skin, bones, and voice, the disguise would collapse very quickly. It wouldn't know names, relationships, habits, or how to operate human machinery. Yet, Several infected characters move throughout the base without anybody immediately recognizing that something's wrong with them. Biologically, the most reasonable explanation is that the creature duplicates the structure of the brain along with the rest of the body. If memories and learned behavior are encoded through neural connections, then reproducing those connections could allow the imitation to access the victim's knowledge. But the films deliberately avoid giving us a complete answer. We don't know whether a trace of the original person remains conscious inside the imitation. We don't know whether the thing actually experiences the memories or simply accesses them like stored data. And we don't know whether an infected person realizes what they've become. Benning's inhuman scream also doesn't prove that his personality was incomplete. It simply shows that the imitation was exposed before it could continue pretending to be human. What we can say is that the thing copies enough of a person's behavior and knowledge to pass as them, and that may be even more frightening than a simple physical imitation. How fast can the thing take you over? The thing doesn't appear to have one fixed assimilation speed. Instead, the amount of time required seems to depend on how much biomass it has, how much direct contact it gets with the victim, whether it's interrupted, and whether secrecy still benefits it. The dog thing begins attacking the kennel animals within minutes. Bennings is partially transformed during the short period in which he's left alone with the recovered Norwegian corpse. In the 2011 prequel, several assimilations also happen violently and relatively quickly. This means the creature can take over a victim very fast when it has direct physical access. But creating a perfect human imitation may take longer than simply attacking or absorbing someone. The thing must reproduce the victim's skin, face, organs, voice, nervous system, and memories accurately enough to avoid detection. So, the creature seems to have two broad strategies. The first is covert assimilation. It isolates someone, copies them, and returns to the group while appearing completely normal. The second is emergency transformation. Once discovered, it abandons its human disguise and rapidly produces jaws, tendrils, limbs, and defensive structures. The kennel scene shows this transition perfectly. The organism initially tries to remain inconspicuous, but once the dogs react and the men arrive, it becomes a rapidly expanding mass of alien tissue. The pace isn't decided purely by biology, it's also decided by strategy. The thing isn't simply growing randomly, it appears to respond to danger, opportunity, and the likelihood of being discovered. Is there any human tissue left once the thing finishes copying you? A common theory is that infected characters are part human and part thing, but the film describes the process as assimilation and imitation, which would suggest replacement rather than peaceful coexistence. Blair's computer model shows the alien cell surrounding and reproducing the normal cell. The resulting tissue looks like the original, but it belongs to the thing. That means a completed imitation may contain structures that look exactly like human organs, muscles, blood, and bones, but those structures are no longer ordinary human tissue. They're alien tissue performing a human role. This explains Blair's autopsy of the malformed body recovered from the Norwegian camp. Despite its horrific appearance, the body contains recognizable human organs. The thing had reproduced human anatomy, even though the outer transformation had become distorted. The 2011 prequel later reveals that this malformed corpse came from the fusion of two assimilated men, Edvard and Adam. That explains why the body looked like several humans had been crushed together while still containing recognizable internal anatomy. So once the thing completes the replacement, the original victim is probably gone. There may still be some matter that originally belonged to the victim because the thing uses the victim's biomass, but biologically and functionally, that material has been broken down, reorganized, and incorporated into the alien imitation. There's no safe human core in the middle waiting to be rescued. In fact, we'd bet it's a horrible and painful death. Why does every piece of the thing fight to survive on its own? MacReady's blood test is based on one of the most important biological discoveries in the film. After watching Norris's severed head detach, grow spider-like legs, and crawl away, MacReady realizes that a separated piece of the thing doesn't automatically die. The head becomes its own organism. That gives MacReady the idea that blood taken from a thing copy might also defend itself. Human blood is simply tissue once it leaves the body, but the thing blood may still behave like a living creature with an instinct to survive. That's exactly what happens. When the heated wire touches Palmer's blood, The sample recoils violently and attempts to escape. The scene doesn't necessarily mean that every single cell has a human-level mind, but it proves that even a small mass of thing tissue can detect danger and respond independently. The Norris transformation reinforces this. Norris's body, head, and tissue, they don't behave like one permanently unified animal. When separated, individual portions reorganize themselves and continue trying to survive. This is why doing ordinary physical damage to the thing is so risky. Cutting it apart might not kill it, you might just end up creating several smaller things. A bullet could tear off some tissue, an axe could divide it, an explosion could scatter it everywhere. Unless those fragments are destroyed, each surviving piece could remain just as dangerous as the whole. The thing's body isn't a fixed individual. It's a collection of living material that can divide and reorganize whenever survival requires it. Why does the thing sometimes stay perfectly human and other times becomes a flesh nightmare? The thing's human form is its best camouflage. As long as nobody suspects it, there's no reason to reveal claws, tentacles, or giant jaws. Remaining human allows the organism to move freely, gain access to vehicles, sabotage equipment, and isolate more victims. That makes the human form an energy-efficient and strategically valuable disguise. The nightmare transformations happen when the disguise is no longer useful. When the dog thing is discovered, it produces tendrils and defensive structures. When Palmer's blood exposes him, his body transforms immediately. When Copper attempts to revive Norris, the chest opens into a giant mouth. When MacReady corners the Blair thing, it releases a massive combat form. These transformations may combine several functions. Some structures are weapons, others are escape mechanisms, others may be copied anatomical features from creatures the thing assimilated on other planets. It appears to store biological information and produce whatever structure gives it the greatest chance for survival. That means the transformations aren't simply intimidation displays like an animal making itself look bigger. The thing is actively rebuilding its anatomy to attack, escape, absorb, or defend itself. The Blair thing is the most extreme example because it had time, privacy, and additional biomass. Blair had been isolated in the tool shed where the thing could assimilate him, the remaining dogs, and possibly other material while secretly constructing an escape craft. By the time MacReady confronts it, the organism has no reason to maintain a subtle human disguise. It produces one enormous composite form because open violence has become its only remaining recourse. What kind of metabolism lets the thing survive frozen for over 100,000 years? The spacecraft discovered beneath the Antarctic ice is estimated to have been buried there for at least 100,000 years. The organism remained frozen during that enormous span of time and became active again after the Norwegians removed it from the ice. The film never explains the exact biochemistry behind this survival, but the most plausible real-world comparison is cryptobiosis, a state in which an organism's metabolism slows to an almost undetectable level during extreme environmental conditions. Tardigrades, certain nematodes, rotifers, microbes, and some plant seeds can survive long periods of freezing or dehydration by reducing metabolic activity and protecting their cells from damage. The thing may possess an unimaginably advanced version of this ability. Its cells could enter a dormant state in which chemical reactions nearly stop. Protective molecules might prevent ice crystals from rupturing the cell membranes. Once the tissue thaws and liquid water returns, the metabolic process could begin again. However, this doesn't mean that Antarctica is the thing's natural environment or that it thrives in the cold. The film actually suggests the opposite. Cold temperatures immobilize the organism. In the end, MacReady realizes that the thing may destroy the generator so everyone freezes, allowing it to return to hibernation until a rescue team arrives. So the cold doesn't really nourish it, the cold preserves it. Antarctica is dangerous for the humans because they can't survive long without heat, but it's also the only thing preventing the organism from moving freely into the rest of the world. How does the thing keep rearranging bones, organs, and limbs without dying? Human anatomy is highly specialized. Our liver cells behave like liver cells, our bone cells maintain bones, our neurons transmit signals, and although nearly every cell contains the same DNA, Gene regulation locks most cells into specific roles. The thing appears to have far greater control over cellular differentiation. Its tissue can become muscle, bone, skin, blood, eyes, teeth, tentacles, or entirely unfamiliar organs whenever required. It functions almost like a body made entirely from programmable stem cells. But even pluripotent stem cells are not a perfect comparison. Human stem cells need biological signals, time, and carefully controlled conditions to form tissue. The thing can reorganize living mass in an instant. That means each portion of the organism carries a library of biological instructions gathered from every creature it's assimilated. When threatened, it can activate those instructions and manufacture whatever anatomy it needs. This explains why a human head can produce spider-like legs, why a chest can turn into a mouth, and why two human imitations can fuse into one composite creature. The shapes also need not obey human anatomy because the thing isn't human. It only maintains human anatomy when that disguise benefits it. Once exposed, the organism treats the body as raw material. Bones bend, organs relocate, and limbs emerge from the mass because there's no permanent blueprint. The body is just a temporary, convenient arrangement of alien biomass, and the worst part is that destroying one traditional organ accomplishes nothing. There doesn't seem to be any fixed heart, brain, or respiratory system across all its different forms. Can the thing infect animals as easily as humans? The first living creature we see pursued in the 1982 film is a dog. That dog is already an imitation, and once it enters the kennel, it attempts to assimilate the other animals. This proves that the thing isn't limited to human hosts. The organism can imitate different species and reproduce their behavior convincingly. The dog thing behaves enough like a normal sled dog to gain access to the American station without immediately being recognized as dangerous. The 2011 prequel also supports the idea that the creature targets compatible living tissue rather than one specific species. However, the films don't establish that it can automatically assimilate every form of life on Earth. Could it copy insects, plants, fungi, or microbes? Possibly, but that's pure speculation. That said, the creature clearly assimilates complex animal life, including dogs and humans. Blair's computer also treats it as a threat to all terrestrial life, suggesting a very broad biological range. But tiny organisms could create practical problems. Assimilating an insect may offer too little biomass to be useful. Copying bacteria may require mechanisms very different from copying a human being. So the safest conclusion is that the thing can assimilate multiple alien species and probably many other carbon-based life forms. That alone is enough to make it a planetary threat. We don't need a confirmed cockroach thing to understand how horrifying that possibility would be. Is fire really the only reliable way to kill the thing? Fire is the most consistently effective weapon against the thing. McCready, Childs, and the others rely on flamethrowers because intense heat destroys living tissue at the molecular level. Proteins denature, cell membranes rupture, water boils away, and complex biological structures collapse. A burned fragment cannot reorganize itself if its cells have been completely destroyed. That's why the characters don't simply shoot infected bodies. Gunfire could injure or slow a thing form, but it could also scatter viable tissue. However, fire isn't literally the only force capable of damaging it. Explosives, dynamite, and grenades are also used against major thing forms. Kate destroys the Sander thing with a grenade in the 2011 prequel, while McCready uses dynamite to destroy the Blair thing and the American station. The problem is that an explosion may spread fragments unless the heat and blast completely destroy those fragments. The real rule isn't simply use fire. The rule is that every living portion must be rendered non-viable. Fire is ideal for that because it destroys the viable organism and sterilizes the surrounding tissue. But if even one viable fragment survives under the floor, in the snow, or on someone's clothing, the danger may continue. That's why McCready decides to destroy the entire station. He's not trying to defeat one monster standing in front of him. He's trying to ensure that no piece of the organism remains alive when the rescue party arrives. Is there any reliable way to detect a thing before it reveals itself? The franchise gives us two major detection methods, but neither is perfect. The first is McCready's blood test. Because a separated piece of thing tissue tries to protect itself, heating a blood sample can expose an imitation. Human blood remains inert, while thing blood recoils. This method is effective in small groups, but it has serious limitations. The test requires control of every suspect, clean tools, and confidence that the blood samples have not been switched or contaminated. In a large population, testing everybody would be extremely difficult. Drawing blood could also spread contamination if the equipment were reused carelessly. The second major method appears in the 2011 prequel. Kate realizes that the thing can imitate organic tissue but cannot reproduce inorganic material. Dental fillings, earrings, surgical plates, and other foreign objects are rejected or left behind during assimilation. This gives the survivors a way to identify possible imitations by checking teeth and personal medical details. But that test is also imperfect. A healthy person may have no fillings. Someone may remove an earring. Medical records may be unavailable, and once the thing understands how the test works, it may learn to hide or compensate for the evidence. The creature's greatest biological weapon is that a completed imitation can appear almost completely normal. That means no detection method remains foolproof forever. The humans can develop a test, but the thing can observe them, learn about the test, and adapt its strategy to overcome it. Could the thing actually assimilate the entire planet? Blair's computer simulation gives the most frightening numerical estimate in the film. It calculates a high probability that one or more crew members have already been assimilated. It also estimates that if the organism reached a populated area, the entire world population could be assimilated within approximately 27,000 hours. That's just a little over 3 years. Of course, Blair's computer model isn't a reliable epidemiological study. He only has a small amount of data about an alien organism he discovered 3 hours earlier, but the prediction explains why he becomes so desperate. The thing doesn't need to openly attack an army, it only needs one imitation to reach civilization. One infected person could enter a town, airport, ship, or military base. That imitation could create more copies, and those copies could travel elsewhere while appearing completely human. Animals make containment even more difficult. An infected dog could escape into the wilderness. Birds, livestock, or other animals could potentially carry the organism beyond human checkpoints. This is why Blair destroys the radio, helicopters, tractor, and remaining dogs. From his point of view, nobody can be allowed to leave. He's not simply having a random breakdown. He believes the station is the final barrier between the thing and the rest of life on Earth. Even if Blair's exact estimate is incorrect, the basic threat remains valid. An organism that perfectly imitates its hosts, hides among populations, and reproduces through assimilation could spread before anybody understood what was happening. How do the comics add to the thing's biology and survival potential? Dark Horse expanded the story of the Thing through several comics, including The Thing from Another World, Climate of Fear, and Eternal Vows. These stories continue or reinterpret elements from Carpenter's film, although their status as official canon is up for debate. The comics place the organism in new locations and show that it remains dangerous outside the Antarctic Research Station. They explore how the creature behaves around military personnel, civilian populations, and different environments. But one title should be separated from that older sequel line. The Thing, The Northman Nightmare, was released digitally by Dark Horse in 2011 as a promotional prequel connected to the 2011 film. Written by Steve Niles with artwork by Patrick Reynolds, it follows Norse explorers encountering the organism in Greenland centuries before the Antarctic incidents. That story doesn't necessarily mean the Thing from Carpenter's film had previously traveled to Greenland. It may involve another specimen or another encounter with the same extraterrestrial species. The comic's most important biological suggestion is that the organism has been reaching Earth or surviving on Earth across different periods of human history. It can imitate people from completely different cultures and eras because its survival mechanism doesn't depend on understanding modern technology. It only needs living tissue, isolation, and the opportunity to copy. The expanded stories also reinforce the idea that the Thing adapts its behavior to the environment, but claims that it literally becomes stronger after every defeat should be treated as interpretation rather than a clearly defined biological rule. It learns, imitates, and changes, but the comics don't provide a neat scientific progression system. So what is the Thing biologically at the end of the day? Honestly, it might be easier to explain what the Thing isn't. It's not simply a virus. Viruses invade cells and use them to reproduce, but they don't usually rebuild entire organisms into perfect physical copies. It's also not a traditional parasite. A parasite normally lives in or on a host while remaining biologically separate. The Thing replaces and imitates the host. It's more than a conventional shapeshifter. A normal shapeshifter changes its own appearance, but the thing absorbs biological material, reproduces anatomy, and may divide into multiple independent forms. The best description would be an extraterrestrial assimilating superorganism made from programmable, highly adaptable living tissue. Its cells can study other organisms, reproduce their structures, reorganize into new anatomy, and continue functioning after separation from the larger body. It possesses no fixed, permanent form. A human imitation is temporary. A dog imitation is temporary. The spider head, the Blair thing, and every other nightmare shape are temporary arrangements created for survival. That's why it's so difficult to understand. Most animals have one body plan. The thing has information. Every creature it assimilates potentially adds another set of biological structures to that information library. And if it ever reached a populated region, it wouldn't need to conquer civilization through open violence. It could simply become civilization, one victim at a time. Final thoughts. And that, my friends, is what makes the thing such an intelligent monster. Underneath all the gore and screaming, the alien biology is built around several recognizable scientific ideas: cellular imitation, distributed survival, dormancy, biological adaptation, and the destruction of identity. But we shouldn't call its biology completely realistic. No known organism can scan a body, reproduce its memories, reorganize bones and organs within seconds, or remain viable for 100,000 years before rebuilding itself into multiple species. The thing uses real biological concepts as a foundation and then pushes them into impossible extraterrestrial territory. That's why it feels plausible enough to disturb us. It's not scary because we know it could exist exactly as shown. It's scary because the film gives us just enough scientific logic to imagine that something out there might operate according to rules we cannot understand. Let me know in the comments which thing transformation freaks you out the most and which movie monster should get this physiology treatment next. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.